Praise God. It's another time we are coming to the presence of God and sit before the presence of God and meditating the scripture as we do always. It is time for us to sit in the presence of Jesus, to sit at the feet of Jesus. It is Jesus' feet. So we read a passage from the Bible. Today we read from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 onwards. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 onwards. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. So gospel is power. But for whom? The same gospel, it is foolishness for those who are perishing, and it is power for those who are saved. When we go on reading, we understand, for it is written, verse 19, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. Paul says the gospel is folly to many of the people. And he says that only those who are foolish in the eyes of the world can follow the gospel easily. Normally we think only wise people can follow the gospel easily. But Paul says, no, it is difficult for the wise people to follow gospel. Just think, when God calls somebody, he is calling people into uncertainty. Who is plunging into an uncertainty? Not wise people, only foolish people. Foolish in the eyes of the world. And we say, hey, look at that man. He didn't look what is ahead. Even without knowing anything, he was plunging into uncertainty. He's a foolish man. Yes. He's a foolish man in the eyes of the world. Even when Jesus called the disciples, I sometimes wonder, Jesus said, follow me. And all the disciples followed him. And I was just asking sometimes, why these people followed Jesus when he was asking them to follow him? Do you think that in those days, Jesus was a rich man or a corporate head or something like that? No. Who was calling them? Think about Jesus. He was a man with no money. It is easy to follow somebody who has money. But when Jesus was calling his disciples, he was so poor. Even he didn't have money to pay tax. That's what we see. When he wanted to pay tax, he didn't have money. So what is happening? He is asking Peter to go and fish so that he will get the money from the mouth of a fish. So even he didn't have money to pay tax. So he was a poor man. When he says, follow me, these disciples, they were following him and they are plunging into uncertainty. And that's the reason why I say, in the eyes of the world, it is quite foolishness. And when we look at Jesus, we know that he didn't have a house to stay. When he is calling many, many people, normally people, normal way they will think, hey, this man is calling us, where I'm going to stay? If I'm leaving my house, if I'm leaving everything that I have, where I'm going to stay? If Jesus had a big house to accommodate all those people, it was easy. But he was a man who was staying, or maybe in the evening he used to go to the mountains to sleep. He didn't have a house to go. So again, when we look, he has a man with no house, and he was many times, he was hungry. One time, he was expecting at least the fruit of a fig. So he was hungry. Many times he was hungry. And none of these people thought, the disciples were not thinking, okay, if I follow him, what I'm going to eat? Even this man doesn't have anything to eat. No, they didn't think like that. And this man had no credentials of the Jewish religious society. If he had all the credentials, like, he's a scribe, or he's a ruler of the synagogue like Nicodemus, it was easy for them to follow him. But he didn't have any credentials, religious credentials from the religious society of those days. Then why these people were following Jesus? In the eyes of the world, those who choose to become disciples, they were foolish. And Paul says, even this time, normally following Jesus, the true Jesus, maybe you can follow a religion, you can follow an organization, you can follow maybe somebody who has all the money and things like that. It is easy. Even now, if somebody wants to do ministry, normally they are asking, what is the credentials of this organization, and what I'm going to get when I am following this organization. It's like that. But when the disciples were following Jesus, they were not looking anything. So the wise people are not normally choosing Jesus. It is the foolish people. But they are not fools. You know why? Because they know who Jesus is, the real Jesus. The world looks at Jesus, they see as a poor man, hungry, no house, no credentials. But these disciples, they understood who he is. And that is the reason why they were following. To them, it was not uncertainty. Maybe in human way, it is uncertainty. But they are following. They knew that they are following God and God's Son. And that's the reason why I say, worldly, wise people, it is very difficult for them to choose Jesus. And another thing, the wise is not choosing Jesus is only one side of the story. In our passage, Paul says something more. It is not that the wise is not choosing God, but Paul says even God is not choosing the wise. That is also there. You understand the difference? The wise is choosing God. It is not happening mostly. And God is also not choosing the wise. He chooses the foolish people. That's what we see here in the passage that we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. The remaining passages, it says, verse 22, for the Jews demand signs and the Greek seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. So, normally, the Jewish people, they are always demanding some kind of signs. They believe in signs and wonders. And the Greek people, they are not after all the miracles, they are after wisdom, or they need some reasoning, or there should be a good philosophy to follow. Only then the Greek people will follow a person. So the Jewish people, what they are looking whether he is performing some miracles. And the Greek people, they are not looking for miracles, they are looking for a philosophy or wisdom, rationality. They want to understand it in their rationality. But the thing is, the Jewish people are seeking miracles, but Jesus was not performing miracles, or he never wanted to see that the Jewish people are believing him because of the miracles. Even in the Gospels, we see some places Jesus performed miracles and he said, go and tell it to everybody. And some places he performed miracles and he said, don't say it to anybody. If you look to the places where he said, go and proclaim it, it was all Gentile areas. Because they are not seeking miracles, but Jesus wanted them to understand there is a God who is concerned about them. The miracles are only a means to show the love of God, compassion of God to the people. But when he was among the Jewish people in the Jewish territory, he performed miracles because of compassion, but he said, don't tell it to anybody. You know why? Jesus didn't want to be accepted by the Jewish people because of his miracles. Because he came here not to perform miracles, he came here to die for the mankind. He came to die on a cross. So the Jewish people are seeking miracles, and the Greeks or the Gentiles, they are seeking wisdom. But God didn't want to give miracle to the Jewish people and wisdom to the Greeks. Because if they are seeing Jesus because of the miracles, then they will not go after the cross. That is a problem. This is what is happening even today. We are proclaiming a Jesus who is performing miracles, and we forget to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it is easy. Even among the Jewish people, if you are performing miracles, everybody will accept it. But the problem, the cross is neglected when miracles are exposed. Because God is performing miracles because of his compassion. But Jesus came here not just to perform miracles and go back. He came here to die. And also, for the Greeks, it is knowledge. They're performing all the time. They want to see that their rationality is satisfied with some kind of knowledge or wisdom. But Paul says, for Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom. He says, but sorry, we are not giving miracles to the Jews and wisdom to the Greeks. But we have something else to preach. We are here not to preach the miracles or the wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. What is the problem of preaching Christ crucified? It was a stumbling block to the Jews and a folly to the Gentiles. When we preach, Paul says, when I preach Christ crucified, it is difficult for the Jewish people to accept it because they wanted a miracle. They would have been very happy to see that when he was on the cross, he is coming out of the cross and performing a miracle. It was easy for them to believe in Jesus. And that's what they see even when he was on the cross. If you are the Son of God, then come out of the cross, then we will believe. But Jesus was not performing a miracle before them to make people believe in him. Why? Because he came to die. And that is a stumbling block to the Jewish people. And it is a folly to the Gentiles. They couldn't understand a man is dying to save the people. What is the wisdom of the Gentiles? Killing people and saving them. Killing somebody and saving them is the wisdom. Even, if one person is here shooting everybody and they are all dying, what is the wisest thing to do? Kill the person who shoot. Right? That is wisdom for the Jewish people. That is wisdom for the Gentiles. But here we see when the powers of darkness is killing people because of sin, Jesus is coming here and dying for the people. That is folly to the Gentiles. It is a fact. And that's what we see here. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Dying is wisdom for God. The death of Jesus Christ is wisdom to God. And only people who are called or only people who are understanding things in a godly way will understand it as a wisdom. So it is foolishness for man. But Paul says the foolishness of God is wiser than men and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Then he says, verse 27, but God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. Maybe there are 100 ways the wise people found to redeem people from sin. None of them worked. That's what we see in all the religions of the whole world. The religion is trying to save people by, they are finding a way to be redeemed in their own understanding, their own wisdom. But God says, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame strong. Why? Verse 29, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. If these people are finding a way in their wisdom to come out of their disaster, then they will always boast. It's my knowledge that made me free. But here, it is not their knowledge, but it is their surrenderance. They are just surrendering their lives before God. And Jesus, He has done everything for us. We are just giving our lives to Jesus. That is foolishness to those people, but that is the wisdom of God. And Paul says he wanted to make people, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame those who are wise. So the wise people, they were put into shame when something happened on the cross which they never expected in their wisdom. God chose the weak. God chose the foolish. I told you, the wise people are not choosing God, but the foolish people. That is one thing. But even God was choosing not the wise people, but He was choosing the foolish people. We all know the story of the colt Jesus was using to enter into the temple of Jerusalem. And what do we see there? Jesus was asking His disciples to untie the colt, and He was sitting on that colt. It is a royal procession, but the animal He chose, no one will choose a colt or a donkey to make a royal procession or entering into such a place. Or he is like Jesus is king, and no king of those days will choose a colt. Maybe we can say in the Western countries, even in those days, if you're a king, you will always use a horse. In the Eastern countries, if you're a king, normally you use an elephant. And if it is in the Middle East, then they will be using a camel. But no king prefer to use a colt. But Jesus, He was choosing a colt. And when Jesus, the King of Kings, was choosing a colt, He was putting all the other animals in shame. So there were many Mr. Elephants and Reverend horses and Dr. Camels were there. But He didn't choose any of these honored animals. Rather, He was choosing a colt. To make these people shameful. And the elephant was thinking, why? He is not choosing me. The horses will ask, Lord, why you are not choosing me? And the camels will ask, why you are not choosing me? The thing is, suppose Jesus is choosing a horse. He is climbing on the horse and He said, go this way. You want to go to the temple. This is the way. Maybe the horse will say, Jesus, that is not the right way. Because even another king was upon me a few weeks back. He was using another way. So I will take you through this way. He will start counseling Jesus. Who? The horse. Because the horse already knows the way, how to handle it. He's wise. Or the elephant, it is wise. Or the camels, it is wise in going to the temple the way they know. But the colt, he doesn't know which way he should go. So he will obey without asking a question, or he will never try to counsel Jesus. This is what we need to understand. Why God is choosing the foolish people? Because they will never counsel Jesus. Total obedience will be there. So God chose the weak, worthless beings. And what was the problem with the horse and the elephant and the camel? They thought they are worthy. And their understanding that I am worthy to carry Jesus, or their thinking that I am able to carry Jesus, that was the disadvantage they had. Because their sense of worthiness is their problem. That made them worthless. But what was the what was the real strength of the cult? He never thought he is worthy to carry Jesus. You get me? So, if you want to carry Jesus, you need to be weak. You need to be a fool in the eyes of God. Then you are worthy to receive Him. That is your worth. Otherwise, you are worthless. So, God is always choosing the worthless people, and that's what we see there. So, verse 29, it is said, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. So, if God is choosing all the wisest people, then they will boast in their wisdom. But foolish people will never boast. They have nothing to boast. They will totally trust in God, and they will never try to counsel Jesus. So this is what we need to understand this day. And verse 31 also we see, so that as it is written, let the one who boast in the Lord. That is the core message. So anyone who follows Jesus, he should not boast in his wisdom, in his knowledge, in his money power, in his position. If you want to boast, don't boast in anything that you have, but boast in the Lord. What is boasting in the Lord? Trusting in the grace of God and considering ourselves as worthless worms. That's what we need. We need to see that we are giving up our wisdom. If you think you are wise, then that is not an eligibility to follow Jesus, but it is a disadvantage. So what you need to do? You need to empty your wisdom, the worldly wisdom. Only then you will be filled with the godly wisdom. Then you are worthy to follow Him. God will use you, and He will climb upon you, and you can certainly carry Jesus when you understand that you are just a cult, somebody who do not have anything to boast. So I boast only in the Lord. So let's close our eyes and let's pray. Lord, I know that I'm unworthy to carry your God. You chose me for no reason. I do not know why you have chosen me, but it is your mercy. Let me boast in you, O God, and you alone. You alone, my Master. Amen. Okay, for further reading, you can read Luke chapter 7, verse 36 to 50, and Mark chapter 11, verse 1 to 11. May God bless you.